Each year, the IRS and the Fed fraudulently take possession of billions upon billions of Americans' income, often harassing and even imprisoning those citizens who refuse to comply. The special interests that control these institutions have used misleading information, complex statutory laws, and intimidation to scare us into thinking we are powerless to stop this fraud. The process that got us into this mess has taken place over several generations and has been institutionalized to the point that we take it for granted that we should pay tax on our income to the federal government. But that simply is not true.
Franchise Tax Board. You guys see that? Sacramento Franchise Tax Board. They apparently want to collect money with me. And even though I called them and I told them, geez, you guys are saying that I didn't report my second job. I didn't report my second job. Did I say that right? I didn't report my second job, both of which were at least 300 miles apart from each other, and were both full-time, and the hours were overlapping each other. Now, I argued with them and I explained to them, it's physically impossible for me to be here, working here, and 300 miles away in the same state, me to be working another full-time job over there. And what did it say? Unless you can prove that it wasn't you, you have to pay the amount. So they've been sending me this letter. So I don't even get, when I do my tax returns, I don't get nothing. So this is what I think about them. Nothing in my life is simple anymore. Even my paper shredder. Now let me show you a regular letter. Let's say from John Doe Ho Ho, you know, from this company. Alright? Put it in there. Smooth, fast. Currently, there's no problem. But the minute you want to stick the IRS letter in there,
It is a lie that has been slowly and systematically woven into the fabric of our society by the money interests that would enslave our nation and our children to enrich themselves. But you may ask, what's so bad about a national bank with its notes considered legal tender? We have that now. Well, in 1967, Congressman Wright Patman, another chairman of the House Banking Committee, put it like this. He said on the floor of Congress,
in the United States today, we have in effect two governments. We have the duly constituted government, then we have an independent, uncontrolled, and uncoordinated government in the Federal Reserve System, operating the money powers which are reserved to Congress by the Constitution.
Furthermore, despite repeated attempts by Congressman Patman and others, the Federal Reserve Bank has never been fully audited. Who in the world could hold enough power to thwart 80 years of attempted legitimate audits from members of the United States Congress? Let's see. First, note that the Federal Reserve is a private corporation. Perhaps a look at some of its founders will give us some needed insight into its power. They included J.P. Morgan, the Mayer A. Rothschild Company, and Paul Warburg, among others. It's worth noting that the Rothschild family also was instrumental in creating the first national bank of the United States, the one that was eventually abolished by President Andrew Jackson. Here's what Baron M.A. Rothschild had to say about controlling our money supply back in the 18th century. He said,
"Give me control over a nation's currency, and I care not who makes the laws."
Paul Warburg, a German-born financier who emigrated to the United States, masterminded creation of the Federal Reserve Bank. He basically ran the bank until World War II, when the press revealed that his brother Max was running German finances under Adolf Hitler. Warburg quietly resigned the post. J.P. Morgan, another founder of the Fed, and early America's own robber baron, is believed to have used his great wealth to engineer the devastating financial panic of 1907. Warburg, Morgan, and their successors have gotten away with this fraud for more than 80 years, since President Wilson unwittingly signed the Federal Reserve Act in 1913. That same year, Secretary of State Philander Knox announced that enough states had voted in favor of the 16th Amendment to allow it to be adopted as part of our Constitution. The 16th Amendment, you may recall, gives the federal government power to collect an income tax. It provides that Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived, without apportionment among the several states, and without regard to any census or enumeration. Since then, we have learned that the so-called adoption of this amendment was a total sham. In the 1980s, two patriotic Americans, Red Beckman and Bill Benson, chartered a plane and examined documents related to voting on the 16th Amendment in each of the 48 states existing in 1913. The authors found, and have documented in their book, The Law That Never Was, that only a few states actually voted in favor of the measure, not nearly enough to legally adopt it as law. But Treasury Secretary Knox, for whatever reasons, ended up lying about the states' votes and fraudulently announced adoption of the measure. Despite this chicanery, the people remained vigilant, and between the years 1913 to 1915, fewer than 2 million Americans volunteered to assess themselves for the income tax service. But the bankers wanted more, and they kept pushing. They pushed us into one world war, and then a second. By 1933, they either had intimidated or bought off enough members of the government to get their collection arm, the Internal Revenue Service, a monopoly to collect income taxes from the Americans.
So a few weeks later, she called me again and she said, Miss Jackson, remember that information I told you on the phone? It's in the USA Today. Pull it up on the internet. Okay, so I got the USA Today. It was July 7th, 2000. And it says, Dear We the People, most citizens are not required to file an income tax return. The 16th Amendment to the Constitution is a fraud, and if you file, you waive your Fifth Amendment rights. I said, okay, that's some of the stuff she was saying. Now, this was a lot of reading. But I kept reading because I was very interested, you know, being a CPA and into fraud and all that. I wanted to see what was going on. So here in the third column, it says, no one has been able to collect the $50,000 reward offered by Bill Conklin to anyone that can identify the section of the Internal Revenue Code that makes a typical worker liable for the income tax. I'm serious about winning this $50,000. Okay, so it's at my desk. Basically, I just shoved everything off my desk and got the codes out, the regulations out, the tax guide. I got on the internet to look at the Cornell University site, all these different things, and I started researching. And 2 weeks later, I said to myself, oh my goodness, we have a problem here. It doesn't look like I'm going to win this money. And I was sitting there at my desk thinking, this thing is a fraud. 2 weeks it took me to sit there and realize that. I didn't just look at the positive, I looked at the negative, I looked at the IRS site. All these things are going on. This thing is a fraud.
Hey, reverse. For all my troubles, this is all I get? God damn it. The IRS just makes your life real hard.